I'm relieved that I wasn't afraid of this movie.
I was like, we should start.
Yeah, we should start. Is it me or you?
It's your go. It's you.
Is it?
You picked it.
I picked this. How did I pick this movie? What is wrong with me? Wow. Okay. You're listening to The Watchers. Is that what we say?
That's what we say.
Okay. Yeah. You're listening to The Watchers, a show where two women from opposite ends of New Jersey watch TV and movies about really, really scary sticks.
These sticks are so scary.
The sticks are so fucking scary.
Not to like give away too much too early, but I think they're the scariest part of this movie.
Okay, so yeah, I think they are. Okay, hi, I'm Jodie.
And I'm Andrea.
And I hate horror movies, and this was not scary.
We watched the Blair Witch Project.
Project, yes, which I can't say, apparently. I will concede right off the bat that all of my takes are because I saw this how many years after it came out? Almost 30?
25.
Like 25 years after it came out?
24 years, yeah.
Right. And I was super aware of it at the time. And like, if I had seen it at the time, full stipulation, I would have been scared if I'd seen this movie in the theater. I would have been really into the story. I would have been on the message boards being like, I don't know, is it real?
Citizen Detective Jodie.
Yeah.
Well, here's the thing, and I don't remember if I said this last week or not, but I knew this movie for a fact was fiction before I saw it because a cousin of mine went to school with the actor who plays Heather. And yeah. So cool. I don't know why I remember this movie as being so frightening because to me, I think it's cool. I like this movie. I haven't, I hadn't seen it in 24 years or whatever.
Yeah.
But last week I said I remembered it being really scary. And I think it's only really scary if you think it's real.
Yeah. Did you see it in the theater though?
I did.
So I also thought about that. So I watched this on my laptop in broad daylight, right? Like if I was in a theater with a bunch of other people.
Well, that's how I watched it this time because I was like, I'm going to be too scared to watch this at night. But I don't think I would have been. I
wouldn't have been.
And I was 13. So I wasn't so young that it.
But that's young enough. And I mean, even at 19, I was like, so we'll talk a lot, I'm sure, about the sort of social context of the late 90s in our specific, this is going to be another one of those annoying Jersey episodes, I'm sorry. But like, I think that one thing I think I texted you last night or yesterday afternoon when I was watching this was like, if I hadn't been sneaking around the basements of abandoned mental hospitals, maybe this would have been scary. Right. But like, I think I texted you and was like, they found a house? Like, it's just a house. Like, yeah, okay, fine. There's like kids' handprints on the walls. Yeah, okay. But like, look at this picture that is my background. Like, I was breaking into abandoned mental hospitals with my friends and taking pictures like the photographer that I would eventually become. And so I related really hard to the protagonists of this movie. And like, I guess if I had not known if it was real or not, it would have scared the shit out of me. But like,
that's what I mean. But I did know. I don't know what. Yeah. I kind of think this is how memory works, right? Because I don't know if what I'm actually remembering is how I felt when I watched this movie in 1999 or how my memory remembers all of us reacting to this movie in 1999, right? So that's hard to say. 1999 was a long time ago. But I also, I always say like I'm not an outdoors kid and I'm afraid of everything, but that kind of didn't matter growing up in New Jersey. And I still spent a lot of time traipsing around in the woods. I remembered something I hadn't thought of in years, which is in 1999, a friend of mine recruited a few of us to make a parody of the Blair Witch Project.
Oh my God.
And so I spent a lot of time. We never finished it.
Does this exist still?
No.
Oh my God, I would pay money to see that.
We never finished it, and I wasn't on camera. But it was just, like, it was one of those things. But it was her parody was the Blair Witch instead, for some reason. This is just 13-year-olds with cameras. She wanted the Blair Witch to be Britney Spears. And so what you would hear out in the woods was "Hit Me Baby One More Time" from far away, and then people running away and screaming because we were all really cool and into like punk rock and stuff. I've killed Jodie. And it was called the Blair Witch Project because you weren't supposed to like Britney Spears.
Oh my God.
If you were a 13-year-old girl who was into like punk rock. I had completely forgotten about that until yesterday when I was watching this.
Fucking masterpiece. Wait, I'm crying.
I completely forgotten about that. But so it's just to say, like, I also spent a lot of time traipsing around in woods. And then the other thing I spent a lot of time doing was standing outside of abandoned buildings like this one and praying that my friends who were inside exploring weren't going to get murdered because I was too afraid.
Literally not okay.
Isn't it crazy that you could just fully forget something like that?
Yeah. I mean, like, I broke into so many abandoned places as a kid. Like, I was looking, I mean, as I've said to you, sorry, I'm still crying. As I've said to you, I'm currently scanning all my negatives from, like, my entire life, basically. And a lot of them from my college and teen years are from various New Jersey abandoned places. So there's like the Nike missile base that was in Mahwah that is now like McMansions. But then there's other places in like West Milford. West Milford is notoriously like, you know, kind of woodsy and creepy. And there's like, you know, abandoned places all over the place. There's Jungle Habitat, which was the old like shitty safari in New Jersey that that is now like a mountain biking park that my old friend Andy takes his kids to, and he's the one that we would like search for Jungle Habitat because it was hard to find in the woods. And like apparently I have pictures of it, like all that's left was the big arch sign and apparently some like old cages in the woods. But the rumor was that like all the animals had gotten out and there were like lions roaming around in like the woods of I think West Milford. So all of that is like the history that I was a photography student, like, and so all of that is like,
right. So when they're freaking out at her for wanting to document everything as their world is crumbling around them, you understand
100%.
Yeah, that's a conceit that works really well for me in this movie. Like, I don't think it worked for everybody, but I think it, I got it.
Yeah,
and I don't know, I'm obviously not a photographer or an archivist or anything, so I don't know if it's just the, like, that part of the like Jersey exploration in me that's like, yeah, of course you'd want to. Yeah. Like, what else are you going to do? It made
Keep
sense
filming.
To me. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, like, and to take this immediately to a sort of darker place, like, you know, when my dad died 12 years ago, I had a friend of mine ship my camera to me from grad school because I hadn't brought it home with me like an idiot.
Right.
Because the only way I could deal with what was going on was through the camera. Like, that was it.
Yeah, that makes sense.
And so people that have that instinct and that's like the way they see the world, that is absolutely what you would do. You know, I would keep shooting.
She also, you know, this movie, it didn't invent the found footage genre. It didn't you know, there's really nothing happening here that hadn't already been done before, except I do think she invented woman true crime podcaster voice.
Oh my God. I think you're right. That's such a funny take. I hadn't even thought about that.
She puts such a different voice on when she's doing that, which is I thought that was such a fun touch.
And they actually framed it like a real shot.
Yeah. I loved it. What's this movie about, Jodie?
You have to recap. I chose it.
You chose it.
What's this movie about, Andrea?
It's so confusing to me that you picked
I know,
this
because
movie.
we've been it's also confusing to me. Yeah, I don't know what happened there. I must have lost my mind temporarily.
And it ended up being fine, though.
Yeah, it ended up being totally fine. Like, not scary. I'm not afraid of sticks is the thing. Or rocks. I'm a big fan, actually. I spend a lot of time with sticks and rocks.
I don't know. We've talked about that at length. Like, okay, I'm going to tell you what this movie is about. This is a movie about 3 film students who are making a documentary about a town in Maryland called Burkittsville, originally Blair Township, and
which again sounds like Jersey.
We're going to be
so annoying
about the Jersey of all this week, though we are going to tell you something at the end of this episode that I think might actually help us not be so obnoxious this week, because we're going to get to really dive in next week.
We'll see how that goes.
But it does feel very Jersey. I should also say Heather, the actor, is from Upper Darby, which is basically Philadelphia. There are plenty of accents in this movie that are so Delco, so South Jersey, felt so familiar to me. So this movie, like, all you have to do is switch out Blair Witch for Jersey Devil and Burkittsville or Blair Township for any of the townships in New Jersey that feature where the Pine Barrens feature, which is many of them. And you could do everything else exactly the same.
I think I actually, when I was a kid, thought this was a Jersey movie.
I could see
I'm realizing.
Yeah, I could totally see that. But it's
because South Jersey was as far away as Maryland in my mind.
Basically the same thing. Burkittsville is like a kind of seems to be like a kind of middle class, like blue collary sort of town, and they have this urban legend. The urban legend, as urban legends often are, is a little confusing, I think. The first layer is the Blair Witch herself.
Okay, so this... I'm laughing at the fact that I found something on JSTOR about this, because that is like the most...
Yeah, if you're going to do the research,
this podcast thing that I could have possibly done. But so basically what I found was something called Devil's Advocates on JSTOR, which is it's published by Liverpool University Press, and it's a series of books about different horror movies.
Cool.
And this one, Blair Witch Project, is by Peter Turner, who is some guy that I'm not going to look into because I don't have time. But there's this whole book on Blair Witch. And when he outlines the plot, I think what he does is, and the legend, is he is also referencing all of the supplemental material.
Okay.
So it's not just what's in the film, but he is giving the chronology of the Blair Witch mythology. So maybe I should interrupt your recap, because I think that the movie purposely maybe confuses the mythology a bit and makes it a little murky. But then when we talk about the supplemental material, there's so much more specifics. But just so you know what happened to the quote-unquote Blair Witch, Ellie Kedward.
I don't think we get Ellie's name in this movie, right? No,
we don't.
Okay.
And it's also an anagram for something, which I have to find.
Well, it's barely, hold on, I do know this. It's an anagram for Edward Kelly.
Oh, God. Oh, right. Yes,
which is
barely.
It's so funny.
So several children in 1785 accused Ellie Kedward of luring them into her home to draw blood from them. Kedward is found guilty of witchcraft, banished from the village during a particularly harsh winter, and presumed dead. By midwinter, all of Kedward's accusers, along with half the town's children, vanish. Fearing a curse, the townspeople flee Blair and vow to never utter Ellie Kedward's name again.
Okay.
So that's the 1700s part.
Ellie, okay. So all we know from the documentary is, this is where I get confused, because the movie, this is what becomes confusing for me, is the movie is called The Blair Witch Project. So the whole time you're expecting to learn about the Blair Witch. And the first story you get, because the three filmmakers, before they travel into the woods, are interviewing, and this is maybe my favorite part of the movie. They're interviewing, different townspeople.
Yeah.
And something I learned about the production of this movie, which we'll talk about after
I have so many fun facts.
Yeah. Is that the actors didn't know which of the people were planted actors and which were just random townspeople they were actually talking to.
Yeah.
Which is
and one
so
of those
fun.
Random townspeople
was Ellie Kedward.
One of those random townspeople said she'd heard of the Blair Witch Project, she was not a plant.
Which is so funny. I mean, we see that all the time now.
Yeah.
They show those like TikToks of people walking around, or people at Coachella. Do you know the videos from where they go and are like, oh, are you excited to see blah, blah, blah band? And the people will say yes, but it's a band that doesn't exist. It's just the power of just cultural influence and not wanting to look like you don't know. It happens all the time. There's also, my favorite one of them is when the mom is telling
That's the one.
And her kid freaks out and is like, no, and covers her mouth. I remember.
But that's the woman.
That's so funny.
Is not a plant and did not, and just went along with it.
It's so, I would love to know, do you have
interview her?
Yeah, seriously. And I remember being so afraid of that kid because it feels like the kid, and like, I think what's happening is the kid heard the phrase scary story and just didn't want to hear a scary story, which I understand. But it feels a little supernatural in a way that is so fun.
Which is filmmaker gold. Can you imagine when they got that clip back and they were like, that wasn't even a plant?
Yeah.
And that just happened. And that kid is like, talk about like somebody playing along.
Yeah. So they're traveling, they're like, bopping around town, interviewing different people. And they learn a story about a girl who gets lost in the woods in 1888. She's gone for 3 days, and she says that she saw an old woman while she was out there whose feet never touched the ground. So that woman is, we think, the Blair Witch. Another story that somebody tells is a woman, is her name Mary Brown?
Yeah.
Who they decide is a kook, but she says that when she was out in the woods one time, she was like fishing with her dad, I think maybe. She saw an old woman who basically is how I would describe the Jersey Devil. She's like, bipedal, whatever, covered in horse fur. You get a lot of...
That was the Jersey Devil.
Yeah, that was the Jersey Devil. But they write her off as a kook because she's also a ballerina and says she's in the film industry and blah, 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 blah.
Yeah, but famously the Jersey Devil vacations in Maryland, and that's obviously who she saw.
Right, so that makes sense. that all checks out. And so we're building this story of who I said the Jersey Devil, who the Blair Witch is, right? Her feet never touch the ground. She's covered in horse fur, blah, blah, blah. Then another story we learn about, and this is the really gruesome one, is this guy Rustin Parr.
Yeah.
Who was a hermit who lived in the woods of Blair Township of Burkittsville. And he came down from like out in the woods into town and said, I'm finally finished, which is spooky. Mm-hmm. And so they go to investigate and they find that he's killed seven children. Mm-hmm. And they tell the person who tells the story, and this was added after the fact, apparently, for context for that last scene in the movie, which I think makes sense because it does. I remember like watching this scene and being like, yesterday, I remember, and being like, this feels a little too spoon feedy for me for what the end of the movie is. But you find out that the way he killed the children is he'd bring two in, he'd put one in the corner facing away, he'd kill one child and just kind of rotate them out.
Yeah.
And then other story is because they're just building
Coffin Rock.
Yes, Coffin Rock is how kind of like scary and how much just like murder has happened in these woods. And the story of Coffin Rock is 5 men murdered also in the 1800s, I think. And they were like ritualistically murdered. Apparently it was like there was like writing really precise carved into their bodies. The person or people who found the corpses ran to town. By the time they got back, all 5 bodies were gone. And quickly. And
interestingly, in the chronology that I'm looking at from this book, that I'm guessing was, again, compiled from the external sources. I know it wasn't from the film. It was from all of the other legends that and website and all that we'll talk about. But apparently, actually, those men were part of a search party dispatched for a girl who was reported missing in 1886. 8-year-old Robin Weaver is reported missing. And search parties are dispatched.
That's the girl who, when she came back, said she saw a woman whose feet never touched the ground.
Must have been, yeah. And so it was the one of the search parties that were murdered and disemboweled.
So that apparently happened at the same time as the story.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, and if you ask me, that's one murder too many. For us to keep track of. In this movie, it was distracting.
Yeah, and so, but I do like all that setup. You also get at first what seems to be I was like, oh, we've got some scare me stuff going on here, which is at first it seems that like Heather is the really capable, if a bit abrasive one in the beginning, and the guys are like maybe a little more inept, but easier to like.
Yeah.
And that kind of shifts around throughout the movie, I think, which I actually kind of like. But so they get all of that, and then they go out into the woods, and that's the rest of the movie. They every day continue to get lost because I think Heather thinks she knows how to read the map. Yeah. None of them actually do. They also lose the map at one point.
Well,
we find out, that Mike kicked it into the creek.
Yeah.
And they're slowly unraveling and slowly each night being tormented more and more by something out in the woods. The first night they hear some like what sounds like footsteps. Maybe it's the second night. Then they start to hear some voices. They hear a baby screaming.
Children's voices.
Something attacks their tent at one point. You can actually like visually see that. Josh disappears.
And there's like stuff left outside their tent too.
Which
lots of scary sticks.
So many scary sticks and scary piles.
Rock cairns,
so many all over the place. Which again, I remember finding very frightening when I was younger. I think it's cool. I think it's like an interesting way to threaten somebody if this were real. And I think we've established, like, I'm not like. It's very easy for me to suspend my disbelief. It is very easy for me to do that with a movie. It's not something I struggle with. For some reason with this movie, it's so hard not to think about it through the lens of, well, the year it came out, nobody was sure whether or not it was real. So that does color it. But I do think it is really eerie to see, like, they at one point they come upon this, like, not really a clearing, but a thinning of trees where then hung between them are all of these scary stick sculptures that does kind of prey on our, because they keep calling it voodoo shit, which just is like I just don't think any northeastern white kid in 1999 knew what quote unquote voodoo shit would really look like. So it's kind of like playing on just that kind of like ignorance too. And so Josh disappears. The thing that is scariest to me in this movie, other than the one bundle of sticks, like I said, is the thing, because they do this there are like a few movies that do this. They've been traveling all day and they end up in the spot they started from. Yeah. Which is really frightening to me. That is scary.
No, I get that. And that's also the moment where at least for me, it was like, okay, can Heather not read a map, or is something fucking with them?
Right, exactly. You know? Something really powerful if it's able to do that, fucking with them.
Like, is the woods a Bermuda Triangle? Right?
Exactly.
Like, a place you can't escape once you've gone there. You know, maybe it's not that she's terrible at reading a map. Maybe it's just that, like, the woods doesn't want them to leave.
Exactly. And that's what seems to become more and more apparent, because they've been traveling for days and days and days.
And as Heather says, America has killed all its natural resources, so you cannot get lost in the woods in America.
Yeah, she keeps saying that. And I wonder, if you're in the woods where they shot this, how long you would have to walk in one direction to eventually hit civilization in any direction. I do think that in the Northeast, like maybe south of New Hampshire. I was going to say, once you get up into New England, New Hampshire and Maine is a whole other thing. Yeah. But once you're south of like real New England, it is... Yes, you can get lost in the woods, but I don't know that you could get lost for that many days if you like just looked at the direction of the sun and walked in one direction the whole time. If you just made sure you were actually walking in one direction and you had the physical capability, that there wasn't something stopping you from actually covering ground all day long. Yeah. I don't think you could be trapped more than a few days, right? Or lost. Well, because this was filmed in Cedar something Forest in Maryland. I can't remember. Filming... Seneca, I was thinking of New Jersey, Seneca Creek State Park, which is 6,300 acres along 14 miles of Seneca Creek, and it's run to the Potomac River. So 14 miles, you could easily walk in, like, I mean, hikers walk that in a day, easily. Right, so yeah, I think that this specific area of Maryland they're in, it would be hard to not hit civilization if you walked in the same direction for a couple of days. Right. So something is keeping them there. Yeah. And Josh disappears and Mike and Heather continue to fall apart. They hear screaming that sounds like Josh at one point. in the middle of the night. They aren't sure if it's actually Josh or it's something that can sound like Josh, because at this point they've started to realize or believe that there's supernatural forces working against them.
Yeah.
Then Heather finds a very scary bundle of sticks, which is the thing.
This is actually a scary bundle of sticks.
This is a very scary bundle of sticks.
Yeah.
And she opens it, and it is, now this is when you asked me if there was any gross eating in this movie, and I said no, but there was something related that was really gross, but I figured you'd be fine with. It's a bundle
that made me laugh.
It's a bundle of sticks filled with teeth and a tongue. And it is...
Well, so
is that not a tongue?
It's not actually a tongue. It looks like a tongue. It's just teeth and hair, apparently.
Is it supposed to look like... It's not supposed to look like a tongue. It just happens to.
Yeah. I read something with an interview with one of the filmmakers who said that because of the shitty quality of the video, they kind of like the fact that it could be a number of things.
Right.
But it was just actual teeth that they got from a dentist.
I did read that.
And a piece of Josh, the actor's hair that they cut.
It looks so much like a tongue.
It
now
does,
I'm
but
even
it's not.
less scared because it looks
just teeth
really
and hair.
gruesome. But I could get you some teeth, no problem. A tongue is harder to scare
If you
up.
need teeth, call Andrea.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So that is, and Heather,
but that is creepy.
Mike doesn't see that. And Heather, I don't think, tells him that she's found that.
No, she keeps it from him.
And so there's that really good where she starts putting gloves on. She's like, I'm just putting gloves on my hands. Like, I thought that was really good. And then we have the famous scene that has been made fun of, made a parody of a million times, which is that very close-up, snot-covered face apologizing.
Yeah,
Heather's, it's her fault, whatever. They eventually come upon a house out in the woods. It is a very scary abandoned house. Again, if you are from New Jersey, and I'm sure other places do it as well, but we're kind of like famous for our kids exploring, as we talked about at the beginning of this episode and a million times before, abandoned sites. But it's a scary house. There's little bloody handprints all over. There's
all those kids.
There's some like symbols. And that scene is really tense and stressful to watch, I think, because they're cutting back and forth between the two cameras. They're both running around the house. They're both screaming for each other and for Josh. And then one camera falls, and then we cut to just Heather's POV, and she enters a room, and you get the shot, which is what I've chosen as my background, which is clearly Mike standing in a corner, and then her camera falls.
Yeah.
And that's the end of the movie.
That is the end of the movie. Yes.
And so I guess this is what's confusing about the legend of it all, is it's not the Blair Witch who is...
No, because it's the Raymond, whatever his face is,
Rustin
story.
Parr.
Sure.
But are we to think maybe that Rustin Parr is like possessed maybe by the spirit of the... Or that somebody, maybe Josh, maybe the Blair Witch does the possessing and she possessed Rustin Parr all those years ago, and now she's also possessed Josh, maybe?
I think this might be more thought than the creators actually put into this.
But then who are we to assume we heard making all that noise in the woods before Josh disappeared?
It all falls apart if you think too hard about it. There's too many elements.
Which is kind of the brilliance of being so adamant about marketing this as a true story, because you can't question it, right? Like, this is just, these are the facts. Here's what we have, and we can't explain anymore. And in that way, I think it's kind of brilliant. Like, I think they did obviously they did a great job back then, because we still talk about this movie.
Well, and I will say, I think part of the reason we talk about this movie is not because of the story, or a big part is not because of the story. Like, the story is...
You and I have done more thinking about the story than anybody has probably in a long time already.
Yeah,
at this point.
because it really doesn't hold up as a story once you start picking apart especially this article that I read where it was like actually chronologically writing out each bit of the legend from all of the sources, not just from the movie.
Right.
It's like, wow, this is a lot, and it doesn't quite relate to the way this movie ended. I will say, and you may know this already, but there are like a bunch of alternate endings that were shot. There's like 4.
Yeah, I haven't seen.
I watched them.
Watch any of them.
They're bad.
Okay.
So it's exactly the same. The only thing that's different is what Mike is doing when she walks into the room. So the end that we have is him facing the wall.
Spooky.
There's one where he's hanging.
Oh, what's he singing?
No, hanging.
Oh, ow.
Like from a noose.
Oh, and that would have had to have happened so fast.
Singing would have been creepier.
What song?
One where he's hanging. Yeah. There's one where he's kind of like crucified looking, but kind of floating. Like it's really shitty quality, so it's hard to tell. But he's like kind of hovering in a crucified pose. And then there was another one that I can't remember.
You sure it's not one where he was singing?
I wish it was. I really do. But all of them, I think of the choices, this was the best choice, especially with the additional scene that they added in, like you said, of the story of the kids facing the wall. Like at least it connects to something. I get the idea that it was maybe felt a little heavy-handed watching it after the fact, but I think without that, nothing made any fucking sense about the way that it ended.
Yeah, it also does, if you don't know that, not to get like whatever, but it does kind of just like maybe he's peeing.
Yeah, it does look like he's peeing. But it does. So I think the reason that it worked the best was partly just because it connected to earlier in the movie, but also throughout the movie, Mike's character is erratic, childlike. He says he kicked the map into the creek, and that's
he like threw a tantrum.
Exactly. And so the idea of him as like a kid in this ending kind of fits with the character that he kind of created for himself.
Yeah.
There's a lot of different directions we could go in talking about this movie. I feel like as someone who didn't see it originally, I don't know how much of this has been talked to death, but the production is super interesting.
Yeah.
The marketing is super interesting. Like,
yeah, I would like to talk about the production because I do think
let's start with that.
That and the marketing are the things that I think are maybe even more interesting than the movie itself, for sure.
Yeah. I think we could also talk about some of I personally kind of want to talk about the aesthetics of it.
Totally.
From the perspective of somebody who thinks about these things all the time. But let's start with the production because I think it's fascinating, and it's the reason that this movie, I think, is still talked about because it's such a departure from how a movie is normally shot. So do you want to start like with your thoughts about it, or
do we just want to just kind of run through how this movie...
let's talk about how they did it.
How it was made.
Yeah.
Just to start with the casting probably, was just they ran some ads, like literally they were just like, we need actors who are good at improv.
And are willing to be really uncomfortable.
Yeah. And just kind of, and that was it. And these are the 3 people who were cast based on that.
Did you read about how Heather was cast? About her audition?
I don't know. Tell me.
So when they walked into the casting room, the actors, they were told that they were just going to be improvising when they walked in. And so when they walked in, they didn't even the casting people, the directors, the creators didn't introduce themselves, didn't do any of the formalities. They basically just started asking them questions. Huh. And they were told that the scene that they were walking into was that they had been in prison for like a sentence of 25 years and they were going up for parole early. And they were like, why should we let you out of prison? And apparently Heather was the only one who was like, maybe you shouldn't. And they were like, she's fucking creepy. We like her. Like, imagine what she would do after a few days in the woods of like being deprived of food. Like, so her audition was apparently very memorable.
That's cool.
Yeah.
And then they basically put them in the woods with the this is an obvious thing to say, but like the cameras they used are the ones whose footage you're seeing.
Diegetic cameras.
And as far as they knew, they were out there alone, except that they were being like, I read like all of their instructions for the day were in like film canisters that were left for them. So they knew they weren't like actually isolated. But in terms of interacting directly with any sort of like outside crew, I think that was pretty limited, right? Or have you?
Yeah. So, okay. Again, like I said, I did way too much research.
No such thing. Also, this is your movie for the week, so feel free to
so
go nuts.
I found out a lot about the actual filming process. But yes, you're right. They were basically left alone with the cameras. They were given instructions daily in these little film canisters for like what their character was going through that day, or like a direction to take the character. They were also given GPS coordinates to get to for the next day. And they had GPS units on them, so the crew always knew where they were. But the directions would be very vague, right? Like, and they were not allowed to share them with each other, so that it would
fun.
Because it would create this distrust, right, among the three of them. And then at night, the crew would come in and fuck with them, right? So the crew was shaking the tent. The crew was running around like in all white, like running past them.
Because there's that one when they do run out of the tent, Heather sees something and she's screaming, "What the fuck was that?" And she sounds so scared.
So you know what that was?
I did read what this was, but if
you want a crew member like dressed in all white with a white
like in a morph suit
stocking on his head. Yeah. So the thing is, like, they knew that they were being fucked with at night by the directors, and I guess like the first night or two it was actually kind of scary, and then after that, when they would hear something in the middle of the night in the woods, they'd be like, "Oh fuck, we got to get up and act now."
Right.
You know. So it definitely, like, it was immersive, but it also, like, they were attached to reality the whole time. Like, they had a safe word with the directors, and they had a safe word with each other.
Nice.
The safe word they had with each other was taco, though, and they felt like they had chosen a bad word because they got really hungry towards the end, and every time they said the word taco, they got more hungry.
There are a couple of scenes that are really kind of sweet, because they do get really, really tense with each other and nasty with each other, but they keep fighting to hold on to, because they realize they're all, any of them have, that they might be out here for the rest of their lives, who knows. And so there are moments where they get back to being like sweet with each other, and it's almost always about food. I think there are a couple of scenes where one of them says, he's like, "I've got a cheeseburger in my pocket," and then one of them is talking about like what meal, like mom's mashed potatoes, that whole thing. And it's funny because I would bet that some of that is like coming from a very real place, because they weren't being fed while they were out there, right? At least not enough.
They were being fed, but this is like such psychological torture. They were being fed, but each day they were being fed less.
And so
it was never enough for them to starve. It was always enough to keep them going. But it says, this is by Michael, I think. The characters are the actual names of the people in the movie, which becomes a problem in their lives later on. But Michael Williams says, "Let's say the first day was a sandwich and a bag of chips for lunch, and the second day was maybe just the sandwich. The third day was maybe just the bag of chips. The fourth day, maybe we didn't have a lunch. By the last couple of days, there was enough to sustain, but not a lot of food. So they decreased the amount of food we were eating, which we knew was going to happen, but it wasn't like we didn't eat for days. Our safety was never at risk. The whole idea was to have us uncomfortable as possible without putting us in danger." Heather Donahue said, "We didn't have to skin squirrels or anything. It was kind of a daily use park. We had to stop shooting for families going past on their bikes."
That's really funny. I'd never read that.
There's a huge oral history, like a 4-part oral history of the movie on the week that I went through last night. Josh Leonard says, "I was probably too stoned to be scared." He was apparently stoned through a lot of this movie.
Well, good for him.
Yeah. So yeah, that's it was basically they were being led through GPS. They were being given vague instructions. And then the thing that I don't think I knew, which I should have known because it's one of the most famous things about the movie, is that everything in it's improvised. Yeah. Like all the dialogue is just, they were given like instructions for the day and then told to just go do it and film it. So nothing was scripted.
Really impressive when you think about that, especially because these are young actors.
Yeah, they're like 19 to 22-ish.
And it's like everybody's first major film, I think, right? And it's a lot to... They're also not... Like, it's not like they're longtime professional filmmakers. They're doing a lot of new things.
Yeah, they had to, like, have crash courses on how to, like, I think it was Josh was partly cast because he already knew how to use the camera. And then Heather had to be somebody. Yeah. And Heather had to be trained to use the camcorder, and Mike had to be trained to use the DAT recorder or whatever. But yeah, I mean, people at the time, I guess, complained about how bad the dialogue was. And it was like, that's the point. Like, they're like scared kids. They're not being fed lines. They're just saying what they're being repetitive. They're saying what people would normally do in that situation.
And it is unbelievable to me that they sound so believable as just regular people talking, because it is hard to write dialogue and deliver dialogue that sounds like real people talk, but isn't like, but that is still compelling. And it is even when they're being like the dialogue that people are complaining about, like it's still, I was never really bored watching it and listening to them talk, I don't think. And although it is only an hour and 20 minutes, so that helps.
Thank God. Everybody, please, short movies.
So
yeah, and so apparently the only part that was sort of not filmed solely by the three of them, with no assistance, was at the beginning, the interview with the guy that we talked about that was like to set up the kid standing in the corner thing. And then also at the end in the house, they were too concerned about someone getting hurt. So, and there was a lot of like choreography that had to be done in that abandoned house that they had to like, they basically, I thought this was interesting. They allowed them to improv their way into the house. They basically said, you're going to get to a thing, you're going to see that thing, and then you're going to go up and Mike is going to go down. And that's all they said. They didn't even say it was a house.
That's cool.
Then they saw the house, they went in the house. Heather starts walking up, Mike starts walking down, and then they basically had to interrupt them because they were afraid that like they were going to hurt themselves.
Right.
And then they choreographed the end of it where they're running up and down the stairs, because otherwise you would like somebody would die. Like,
right. Yeah. Cause
you
it
would
is,
fall.
Yeah. It's
not a set.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Okay. So other things about production. So the notes that they would get, I found a quote from that article that I was talking about. Actually, this is a Guardian article, and it says the notes would say things like, Heather, you're absolutely sure that to get out of this mess, you go south. Don't take no for an answer. Or, Josh, somewhere along the way today, you've had it with this bullshit. And that's it.
That
was what they were given. I know. It's such a cool exercise.
Yeah. And thank God it worked, though, because they could have ended up, because I wonder,
with shit.
Were the people back, how could they have been? They weren't getting dailies or anything, right?
They were. They were. So they were dropping film canisters that the crew was watching.
Okay.
But I will say that, and I don't know, you may know this already, but this was news to me, that the original version of this film was supposed to be about half that footage and half pseudo-documentary footage about the missing kids. About the
missing Heather, Mike, and...
Yeah. Yeah. There was going to be a whole other filmed half that was like documentary, from the outside after the kids had gone missing.
You know what's so funny is I think my guess is that wouldn't work as well as this.
Yeah.
But I love stuff like that. This is so like not really the same thing, but two of my favorite books are Frankenstein and Dracula, and both of them, like, if you've not read the books, there's no reason you would think this, because it's not how the movies are told at all. Frankenstein is just it's a frame story. It is a series of letters, at the center of which is Dr. Frankenstein telling his story. Dracula is letters and like firsthand accounts written on typewriter, and I think
are you going to make me pull up the PDF from JSTOR again? I think you are.
Did I make a connection?
You did.
And
you certainly did.
Two of my Frankenstein's the Modern Prometheus, blah 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 blah, is my favorite book, and Dracula's in my like top 10.
May I read you a quote from an academic source?
Please.
Okay,
wow.
I know this is sort of our favorite thing. In the influences section of this thing that I found, Devil's Advocates, it says, going all the way back to 18th century literature, Harris, 2001, 75 to 76, I will include the footnote, has noted the influence of epistolary novels on the Blair Witch Project.
Oh, I'm having a great time. No better high than being academically correct.
Uh-huh. An epistolary novel is one that is written as a series of documents, most commonly letters, written by either a single or multiple protagonists. Therefore, the reader of such novels only hears the story from one point of view, the main character that writes the letter or diary entry. In the Blair Witch Project, we witness the video diary of the protagonists.
Correct.
Yep.
Hell yeah. Oh, I love
also
that.
In that same section, now I'm gonna make myself happy. We'll talk about the aesthetics a little bit later, but it says, Higley and Weinstock point to the ghost photographs so popular at the turn of the 20th century that suggest to an observer that something extraordinary has occurred and been captured by a keen camera operator. So we're going to talk about the camera function later on, but I just want, that was the same like section. So yes, you are correct. This is an epistolary novel via video in 1999.
Which I think is why I love found footage in general so much. It's such a, and it's, you know, it's funny, and I'm sure lots of people have written plenty about this, is that it is almost only ever used for horror. I can't think of too many other examples. Books are different because, like, Perks of Being a Wallflower, there are a lot of actually young adult novels that are epistolary, but in terms of film, I can't think of too many.
I'm sure there are, but they're not coming to my mind either.
Yeah. And I think it probably has so much to do with the way found footage you can fuck with the because it's that first person. See, it does two things that I'm working through this as we're talking. I haven't thought about this until just now, but it's like, on the one hand, obviously I don't believe this. Camera doesn't lie, right? You're seeing what was filmed, so it's got to be true.
Can I quote Richard Avedon at you?
Please do.
All photographs are accurate. None of them is the truth.
Beautiful. I love that.
Yes. It is how I start all of my photo classes. That's because amazing. The camera does lie all the fucking time.
Of course. Right. Yeah. But the story you get to tell yourself when you're watching a found footage movie, a horror movie, is this is the footage. You know, it's fact. We don't have anything, you know, there's no whatever, blah, blah, blah. But
the thing that communicates that to you is the aesthetic of found footage. It is the poorly shot, poorly lit, shaky, like low quality. That is the thing that says to you, this really happened.
Right, right.
And that is what is used to manipulate people.
And I guess that doesn't like, what other genre could get away with that and still tell an effective story? And again,
photography.
What other film genre could get away with that and still tell a good, compelling story? And I'm sure there are examples that I don't know about or that I'm just not thinking of right now. And listeners, if you can think of any, please, I'd love to hear them. But it is not surprising, but it is interesting that horror lends itself so well to this, or this style of filmmaking lends itself so well to the horror genre.
Yeah. I think also in sort of our little section on production, we should talk about the finances of this movie, because it's a legendary story that is exaggerated occasionally. Some people say, oh, it was shot for $35,000 and it made like multiple millions. It was shot for a very, very small budget of like $35,000 to $60,000. But the post-production added another the estimate is $200,000 to $750,000. So it's not it's not a $900 movie.
Right.
But
no. What a number to throw out.
Random. Just came to me. It grossed nearly $250 million worldwide, though, making it one of the most successful independent films of all time and the highest grossing film up until that point.
That's
like
very
based
cool.
on like its cost to make. Mm-hmm. Yeah. They really did this for almost nothing. They basically all like camped in someone's house. There were like 16 of them sleeping on the floor. Like it just, I
don't know why I love to hear a story like this, but I do.
I know.
It just makes me so happy. Just thinking about how, like, you know, because I love fun that is also miserable. Like, I love the kind of fun where you're miserable while you're having it.
Secondhand fun.
I just learned about.
Yeah. Or what is that? Was I right about the name of it? That's not it.
It's like level or type 1, 2, and 3 fun. Type 2 fun is
type 2 fun. That's it. And that's a hiking thing.
I didn't know. I'm sure that there are examples of me on record before today saying that equivalent. Yeah. I didn't know it was a real thing until literally yesterday when one of my other podcasts I was editing was talking about it. I would not have known what you were talking about if you said that to me 24 hours ago. Isn't that weird?
Yeah. Yeah. It's a thing in the hiking world of like a really tough hike that in the moment is miserable. And then after the fact, you're like, that was so great.
Yeah. Type 1 fun is fun. That's just fun.
In the moment.
Type 2 fun is not having a great time, but you look back on it and you remember it was fun. Type 3 fun is like hiking is like scaling Mount Everest, where it's like it wasn't fun at the time and you don't have fun thinking about it afterward and you're not sure why you did it, but you keep doing it. I would argue that that's when you start traveling into like pathological, like there's like there's some problems there. Nobody
compulsive disorder of some kind.
Yeah, exactly. But
yeah, type
funny?
2 fun. Yeah,
there's a cool synchronicity there.
Yeah.
But so it does make me very happy to think about all these people crammed in, making something that they're not sure if it's even going to work. Like,
it was only filmed over 8 days, and so they were up all night half the time, like just like shaking tents and like leaving sticks outside. And
I said to my roommate, and I feel like you will understand this in a way that they did not. I was like, I can't. The like last third of that movie when they're walking, when Mikey is like just laughing and is fully gone, but they're all furious. But also, I was like, I can't totally explain this, but this was my last semester of grad school. Like, I understand that it wasn't actually as taxing as being lost in the woods and being chased around by a scary witch, maybe, and a murderous ghost. I don't know, but I spent
exhaustion, like, trauma, being broken down mentally.
But also like, knowing that, like, I'm here because I chose this. I did this to myself.
No, that is a good description of the last semester of grad school, actually.
That kind of weird mania. Just
like loopiness. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Oh, I thought there was a funny note that I just wanted to mention when I was reading the like oral history of it. So the three of them are out there, right? And basically, if you just give vague instructions, you don't really have control over the way the personalities mesh. And so originally, Mike was supposed to die first. And so they were going to pull Mike in the middle of the night one night. But when they were getting those dailies that we were talking about, they noticed that Josh and Heather were fighting so much and that it was starting to kind of take over in a way they didn't want. So they pulled Josh in the middle of the night.
Interesting.
They just in his note for that day, it said, tonight when everyone goes to bed, don't fall asleep, sneak out of the tent, don't wake anyone up. If anyone wakes up, tell them you're going to take a piss and then get out of there. And they picked him up and they said, you're dead now. And they took him to Denny's for food. Isn't that cool?
That's so cool.
Isn't that cool?
I'm thinking
so he wasn't supposed to die first.
How much of an influence like this, there's a little bit of like reality TV production parallel
100%.
With this kind of thing of like, this is what happened. It's not improvised.
When people stop being polite and start getting real.
But they're shaping the narrative from the outside based on what they're seeing happening on the inside.
Right. Do I need to go back to my PDF?
I would love for you to go back to your PDF. Oh, I'm having so much fun.
You are killing it right now.
Thank you so much. Wow, I haven't had a professor compliment me that way in so long. I feel alive right now.
Your participation grade is going to be off the charts.
Oh my God, thank you so much.
Yeah, absolute A+ for participation. In an interview with McDowell, who I don't know who that is, Daniel Myrick, one of the creators, concedes that the basic idea was those old documentaries, those old In Search Of episodes that came on in the 70s. There are numerous television precedents for its use of reality TV tropes to increase its sense of authenticity. Castanguy notes that the Blair Witch Project includes documentary conventions, but also considers reality TV to be one of the most important contextual factors for understanding the film. Authenticity is a key factor that both reality TV and audiences of the Blair Witch Project desire. Signifiers of the real are important in maintaining a sense of authenticity, and to a contemporary audience, an awareness of the camera's presence is increasingly an important part of creating the reality effect. The juxtaposition of individual two-camera confessions being edited next to footage of group discussions in reality television programs such as Big Brother can also be seen in the film, because you've got the sort of like snotty nose bit where she's talking to the camera.
Well, and they, at one point, I think it's Josh, says like, why are you filming? She's like, we're making a documentary. And he's like, but not about us. And they have to. It's funny now, not to get all millennial, like having shit to say about Gen Z, but it is funny now that like, I don't know that you would need to include that in a movie like this today.
Right.
But you had to justify Heather always having the camera on back then because it wasn't something we were so used to, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. I want to just end with this little quote here. Higley amusingly suggests Blair Witch Project gives American viewers what they liked in reality TV, a voyeuristic glimpse of people on the edge screaming at one another.
Amazing.
Look at you. Leading us right to it.
It's so true, though.
I know.
Like, it's so...
Well, and this is 99, right?
Yeah.
So what reality TV did we have? We had Survivor, I believe.
And
we
the real
had
world,
the Real
of course.
World.
And I think Road Rules definitely Road Rules, which is, the Real World kind of like traveling spinoff.
And people of my generation, at least, who I graduated college in 99, were very into Real World and Road Rules. Like
obsessed with these shows because they did feel so new and different and quote unquote real. And it's funny too because now there's so much reality TV and we're all I don't know if better is the right word, but more aware consumers of it. Like we know how producers shape narratives for these shows in a way we didn't back then.
And we're weirdly like picky about it. It's like we know that they're producing these people. I'm speaking specifically of like reality dating shows right now because that's sort of the one that's been around the longest that I'm familiar with. But like we want it to be produced because we don't want to be bored.
Right.
But also if we see the producer's hands too much, we get pissed about it too.
Yeah, exactly.
Because it's like you're taking it too far, like you're torturing these people. We wanted them to be mildly tortured, not really tortured, but just mild torture.
We're like experts now.
Yeah. I mean, there's all these podcasts about reality TV that every week will break this stuff down, you know? So we are much more aware of it now.
And you know what's funny too? This is a total tangent side note, but I've mentioned a few of the shows I work on are hosted by ex-reality TV contestants, stars, whatever. But their podcasts aren't about reality TV. That's just where they
just started out.
Mostly like how they found each other, the co-hosts.
And how they got an audience in the first place.
Yeah. And Brain Candy, one of the hosts, Sarah, is a therapist, and her work in grad school, did I already talk about this last week? Is about the like real effects and real trauma on the and the way that like their mental health is affected.
No, you didn't talk about this last week,
because of how horrifically they're treated and how much of that doesn't end up on camera, so they have no there's no evidence. Like awareness or evidence of that. Yeah,
they're very manipulated.
And just thinking about these people traipsing around in the woods and us talking about what that production was like and how they like stressed out the real people to get reactions on camera. Like Sarah talks about the fact that like they just weren't allowed to have the lights off. Like
that's literal. That's an actual method of psychological torture.
It's like a war crime to do that.
Yeah, it is a war crime. I will say that the difference that I see immediately between that and this is that these people had a safe word.
Yeah.
They literally could stop the filming, and they did one night. They were like apparently super wet and cold and tired, and they'd like the tent had gotten water in it, and they were really, really uncomfortable. And apparently they called over whatever communication device they had. They said the safe word because they wanted to be pulled so they could like recoup. And apparently the cast was at dinner and didn't answer, but they had been given alternate routes out of where they were. And so literally Heather just walked out one of those routes and knocked on someone's door.
Whoa. And
then like they called the crew and they came and got them. So like it wasn't necessarily easy to get out of there, but they did have the means to call stop and say, hey, I need a break from this. This is too much. Like, I'm sure there was plenty of pressure not to do that, whether it was implicit or explicit.
Knowing that you could at any point if you really needed to.
Yeah, exactly.
I'm sure
it's
fascinating.
So, I mean, I could talk about the production forever because it's so interesting, but I think we should talk also about the marketing because that is sort of what this kind of, as we said, this is not the originator of the found footage genre. There is something terrifyingly called Cannibal Holocaust.
Oh, fuck that movie.
Did you see it?
Oh my God, yes. Fuck that movie.
I mean, like actual animals are killed in that movie. Like I'm mad that I know about this at all.
I'm not even going to describe it to you. And
Please
actually,
don't.
I won't. And if I did describe it to you, now I'm going back and forth, because if I did describe it to you,
I read a little bit about it and I wish I hadn't.
There's a moment in that movie that I am still so horrified by that, like, the second you said the phrase, the image that I'm thinking of popped into my head, and I will be unsettled the rest of the day.
I'm so sorry.
It happens, a couple of times a year. And it is like an actual, like, there's like a spot in my brain that you could probably, I feel like you could see, that is from that movie.
Yeah.
And now while we're talking about reality TV and that and all, like, I have no desire to seek out those, like, the, like, faces of death and
like
those,
snuff
like,
film kind of.
I hate it. And I didn't know what Cannibal Holocaust was when we watched it, because my friends and I would just, like, we were really into watching horror movies a lot.
Yeah.
And I don't know if somebody in my group who picked that movie knew what it was, but I didn't going into it, and I was furious. I hate that movie.
Yeah, it's from 1980, and it's just so that people know what we're talking about. It was a found footage movie, again, with the idea of the disappearance of a young movie crew that were in search of, like, a cannibal tribe or something. But basically, there's also, I just want to bring this up because there's controversy back and forth about whether the filmmakers knew about it. Like, Edward Sanchez, I think his first name is Edward Sanchez, said that if he had known about that movie, he would not have made Blair Witch in the way that they made it. But other people say, obviously, they knew about this movie. So, like...
Wait, what? I'm confused. I thought you meant the filmmakers of Cannibal Corpse didn't know what they were making.
No.
Why would that have...
The filmmakers of Blair Witch.
Similar, other
they're
than
the
being
same concept.
found footage.
Well, they're the same concept,
and a missing
the movie
film crew. It's funny because, what's funny to me about that is, like, you can't have a found footage movie if the actors aren't playing a film crew. Like, or aren't playing people holding cameras. I'm fine with that. That part of it it feels like, how else, if you want to make a found footage movie, how else do you find the footage? Like, it has to be a crew that disappears.
Yeah. But a lot of people tried to sort of gotcha them and be like, oh, you're influenced by this. You saw this and you wanted to make it. And, who knows? Who cares?
For every found footage, like, that's so confusing to me. What else? How else would you do it?
I don't know.
People need to relax a little bit. Just the littlest bit. Just a little.
But yeah, Sanchez does say he never saw it before making Blair Witch. Who cares? Anyway. So I said all of that basically just to say that, like, this wasn't breaking ground necessarily because it was found footage, right? This wasn't the first of that. What it kind of was the first of was a successful viral marketing campaign before the movie even started.
Because of the internet, which Cannibal Holocaust didn't have at its disposal in 1980, really.
But also, as we'll talk about when we talk about next week's movie, it was not the first to even try this. It was just the first to be successful. Like, there is a level of virality that is shocking when you realize how rudimentary the internet was at the time.
Mm-hmm.
Like, there was a website that you had to go to talk on their message boards. Like, it wasn't like with social media where something will go viral in a day. This happened over months and months and months and months and months.
Right. The way an actual urban legend is spread over time, mouth to mouth.
And during that time, they were adding stuff to the website periodically. Like, it was sort of a back and forth between the people that were creating it and the people consuming it. But it was one of the reasons that when the movie came out, there were huge lines waiting to get in, because they had been, like, on this website obsessing over what was true, what wasn't true, like all of these different little aspects of it, picking apart details, like, and also not only did this happen because of the internet, it happened because of the type of internet we had at the time. Because a few years later, if you had the ability to just really deep dive and Google these people, you would know that they were actors. Like,
totally.
And so it was just enough internet for the virality to happen, but not enough internet for it to be disproven immediately.
Oh.
was like a sweet spot that doesn't exist anymore.
God, again, this is why I'm like, I'm glad that I can still like this movie so much, even though the reason I thought that I liked it was because I was so afraid of it. You know what I mean? Now it turns out it's all of this stuff, because I love that like this movie couldn't have happened the way it did any other way at any other time.
Nope. I mean, it would have been made, but it wouldn't necessarily have exploded the way that it did. It wouldn't have made $250 million.
Right.
You know? Yeah, they even say this in one of the articles I read. It says, now it wouldn't work, Sanchez said. One could easily look out on the internet that Heather from Blair Witch was an actress named Heather Donahue who hadn't disappeared at all. But instead, people were calling her mom with their condolences because they thought that she had died.
Yeah.
To the point where people wouldn't believe that they hadn't died. They were so convinced. This is like, there's a whole thing here about like the fake news internet that we have now, where no one believes anything.
Yeah.
But like they would literally be at events with the directors taking photos, and people were like convinced that they had died and that these were actors playing them. Like it's a false flag operation.
That's amazing. It's amazing. It reminds me.
They didn't want to change their minds.
Yeah. It reminds me of I won't get too much into it here, but plug. I've done an episode of our Jersey or other Jersey podcast. New Jersey's also, or New Jersey is the world. My offshoot, South Jersey, is also the world. Jesus, that's convoluted.
Levels.
We did an episode on Ong's Hat,
yes,
which is fascinating, and it is one of. And again, if it makes sense that I'm as interested in talking about this movie as if Ong's Hat was like, again, one of those things that could only really work the way it did at the time it did. But it was like one of the first alternate reality games. And it was started by one guy. It blew up into something much bigger, and he has not been able to take it back, even though he has on more than one occasion admitted to it being a fictional game that he started as a project for school. And people still from time to time will show up at his house wanting access to Ong's Hat.
I mean, I think as part of talking about the marketing, we can also talk about the effect that it had on the actors, because none of them really, I mean, Josh Leonard has continued to act. He has been sort of a relatively quietly successful guy that is in a bunch of different shows for an episode or two. Like, he's a working actor. He hasn't really become a star of anything. But like when you're in a movie that makes $250 million on a tiny budget, you're told that this is going to make your career. And instead, none of them could escape this movie. None of them. Michael Williams is working as a guidance counselor.
Oh, yeah. I did read that. I hope he's happy.
I hope so, too. He does teach acting to kids, which is cute. Heather has changed her name, but Heather Donahue became a weed farmer.
Good for her.
And a mystic, and has written, I think, 2 books now. But she changed her name.
Book club?
Jesus Christ. If we did a book club, we would not be reading a book about a marijuana farm. No offense. Yeah, nothing wrong with that, but I'm just not interested. But she's changed her name to kind of try to escape it, right? To Ray Hance, which a little white lady stuff going on here, but it says in 2020, Donahue changed her name to Ray Hance, with Ray short for Reigetsu, meaning spirit moon in Zen tradition, after a reinvention that saw her become a spiritual guide. Whatever.
Live your life.
Live your life, exactly. But it didn't do for these 3 young actors what a movie of this level of success should have done.
Right.
Because of I think because of how authentically fucked up they all were when they filmed this, like how they basically were improvising the whole thing. They weren't given these amazing lines to read and act against. And this wasn't a production that supported them as actors. This was an improvisational exercise that was turned into a movie. And so none of them had the kind of success that they probably should have had after this movie. And to the point where, like, Heather Donahue, now Ray Hance, like has a lot of really negative feelings about this experience. Not about the experience of filming the movie at all. She says she still would do it again.
Right.
But the way that it kind of didn't turn out to be what she thought it would be. And also the fact that they didn't get paid that much. The creators made a lot of money off this movie, and I read somewhere, and I can't say that this is 100% true because I only saw it in one source, but the researcher in me is like, I need a secondary source, but that they got paid like $1,000 a day.
You couldn't pay me $1,000 a day to hang out in the woods
and be tortured by people? Absolutely
just
not.
To hang out in the woods at this point in my life.
Yeah. Yeah. So I got this from a site called 80skids.com. So who knows? But it says that right after they're talking about how she changed her name. So this is a relatively recent article. It says the film's 8-day shoot saw Hance, Joshua Leonard, and Michael Williams paid $1,000 a day. Once the movie was raking in the millions, residual checks didn't make their way to the stars. So
that sucks.
And it says at the height of the film's success, Hance did an interview in which she referred to herself as the poorest new famous person in Hollywood, recounting an incident of her battered old car breaking down under a billboard with her face on it.
I would be furious. I would never stop complaining.
Yeah.
That sucks.
It does. And there was also a recent thing. Did this pop up for you when you were doing your internet sleuthing? That the scene of her screaming was recently used in the movie Tar? Like the sound? No. I went on Ray Hance's Instagram. Like I said, I did too much research. And she said something about the actors' strike in support of it because she said, I made a film without certain protections and now my voice is being used in another film and I'm not getting compensated for it.
That's fucked up too.
Yeah. There's a scene apparently where Tar is running through a field or the woods or something and you hear the screams in the background and it is her voice from Blair Witch Project.
Whoa.
And she's not getting paid for that.
Fucked up. So fucked up.
Yeah. Unions are good. We need unions. Anyway, so they had a midnight screening of this at Sundance, and that was when it kind of exploded. And it was bought by Artisan Films for $1.1 million. And then they took over the marketing, the production company that bought the film, and really like blew it up in a way, like some of which I think was probably positive, and the creators are like, did we need like action figures? Like just, it kind of went a little nuts.
Yeah.
But there's a funny anecdote about Sundance. One of the executive producers ahead of Sundance held a screening in the East Village, invited friends, family, publicists, and the crew collected sticks from a nearby park and made them into that twig man and hugged them in the lobby above the snack tables. And then he says, we didn't realize how psychologically traumatic it was for the audience. People just wandered out like zombies, didn't eat the food, and kind of freaked out when they saw the stick figures and wandered off into the village. So they traumatized people with the movie and then re-traumatized them.
They just imagine you think you have just watched a real documentary kind of these people who were brutally murdered and that maybe witchcraft is real, right?
Yeah.
Like, and then you walk out and you see the people who are doing bits.
Yeah. And one of the guys that contributed money to the beginning of the movie, was, I don't have the exact details in front of me, but basically a week before the movie came out, they released sort of a documentary, quote unquote, piece on the Discovery Channel about the legend of the Blair Witch. That could never happen today.
No.
It was such a, I found it. A week before the feature's wide release, Myrick and Sanchez debuted a separate faux documentary called The Curse of the Blair Witch. It wasn't Discovery, on the Sci-Fi Channel. It added to the myth by using interviews and archival material they had cut from the movie. It was not presented as fiction.
It's amazing. It's amazing.
Yeah. Yeah. Yep.
I love it. I'm such a sucker for this stuff. I love it so much.
Yeah. And the way that they kind of explained the fact that it had been turned into a film was that Heather Donahue's mother had contacted these young filmmakers to ask them to look through the footage and,
try to tell
figure
her
out what
story.
happened. Yeah.
I love it. I love it so much.
Yep. Oh, I have another Jersey connection.
Ooh.
So in the Ringer's sort of semi-recent article about the film, when they're talking about how they introduce themselves as the film company contacted by the parents and blah, 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 they were talking about the website that was created, and it says modeling the site after Kevin Smith's View Askew Universe, a website that hosted discussions about the connections between Smith's movies. They frequently popped into forums to offer new tidbits to the so-called investigation. We had written ourselves into the mythology.
So fun. So
another
fun.
little Jersey connection.
That was a good one.
Yeah, I thought so.
Yeah.
I mean, I would argue this is a Jersey movie, but
it just feels so. And I know that we in particular and our group of friends and Jersey in general, we can be a little like, what's the word of like, we think we're the only ones, whatever the thing is. Like,
it's main character syndrome.
Yeah, I think Jersey, because
we definitely have main character syndrome.
It's a defense mechanism because everybody treats us like shit.
Yeah.
But I understand that. So I do understand to say like this feels like a Jersey movie. Like, yes, I know kids run around in the woods and scare themselves everywhere, but it's just so. The thing is,
we had Weird New Jersey. I'm sorry, that is my evidence.
Well, and
Weird
also,
New Jersey magazine.
Again, this has been coming up so much everywhere because I keep bringing it up everywhere. But like, it is unique to New Jersey. We are the only state in the United States where every county
is a metropolitan area.
But we also are the Garden State for a reason, and we have woods, and we have the Pine Barrens, which is a literally unique ecosystem in all the world. Mm-hmm. And to have both of those things happening in the same state, like, it just is a unique experience. So
it's very easy as a child, or at least it was when we were kids, to get to abandoned shit. It did not take very long because the state is so small and so densely populated.
And to feel brave, not me again, but to feel brave enough exploring because you know that home is close. Mm-hmm. You know, that like that tie to civilization is right there. So like,
yep.
It just is unique in that way. And again, I'm sure that
I love how defensive we are about this.
I'm sure that other people have had similar experiences. I'm not saying that. Obviously, Blair Witch Project isn't a Jersey movie, so there you go. Although, again, I will remind you. Well, I actually don't know where the filmmakers are from. I know they're not from Jersey, but
one of them's from Florida.
So, like, I understand all of that, but it just does feel very Jersey to me.
And I have more evidence for you to back that up. This is not from the PDF. This is from an Esquire article, which is maybe less.
It's important to diversify your sources.
Yeah, but it talks about how one of the reasons this movie was so scary is because it expresses our fears of being, quote unquote, isolated in a sea of life. The fact that they know they're so close to civilization and they can't get there.
Yeah.
That is what you're talking about with Jersey, where like you can be isolated in, where jungle habitat used to be. You can feel like you're a million miles from everywhere, but you're only 10 minutes from a town.
Mm-hmm. Well, and because I think one of the things too is that like you can be like so close like that, and it's like in Jersey, the city can be a city, right? It could be right there, and also you can be in a place where you can't get cell phone reception, and and that is scary and is something where it's like to be so close and know. I think that's what it is. That's why I said earlier in this episode, the thing that's so scary to me is that moment when they realize they've been walking all day. And because then it's like, oh, that tether you thought you had to civilization, if you just keep walking, now what?
Yep.
That's horrifying.
Yep. Yeah. Can I talk aesthetics for a second?
You can talk aesthetics for as long as you want.
And we've kind of already talked about this, but the idea of sort of amateur, quote unquote, amateur footage reading as authentic is something that goes way, way, way back in photography and film. Like anytime you want to fake something, if you do it kind of badly,
that's how you do it.
Going to read as more real. And that's like been studied in this PDF. I keep calling it just a PDF. It's like a book. But it says, the reason we believe what we see more in the Blair Witch Project than in other horror films is precisely because of our trust in cameras and recorded footage. Though we were acutely aware that this is a film and a construction, the spectator is also invited to believe what they see on screen. He also says, we're inclined to believe what we see due to the amateur nature of the footage. The inexperience of the camera operators and their basic and limited techniques emphasize that the footage must be real and is not polished and carefully crafted enough to be faked. And that shows up with like the use of the darkness, the fact that like there are scenes where you can only hear voices or you can just kind of see grainy light in the corner. So
right, because if you're making a movie, why would you want it to look bad on purpose? It must be real.
Yeah, exactly. So camera lies, kids. Camera lies.
Hello lies. That's from Lost.
That's really all I got. Amateur equals real in the world of photography and film, because we are simple humans and we trust technology more than we should. Even now when we trust it less than we used to, I think we still, I mean, Jesus Christ, not to get too dark, but like everything that's happening in the world right now, there's so much faked footage out there or footage taken from other places.
Right.
I have a whole lecture on this in my class. I could give a whole, I could do a PowerPoint right now if you wanted me to, Andrea. You probably like it. I don't think our listeners would.
I was going to say, I probably do want you to.
You'd probably enjoy it. Yeah. I have this PowerPoint about like the history of faked news events and faked footage and
cool.
the different ways.
I mean, it's horrifying, but fascinating.
But in the different ways that you don't even have to fake the footage. You can shoot from a certain angle. You can, cut out part of what's being, what's actually happening. You don't need to even fake footage to influence people's emotions,
right.
But you can also do that and people will believe you.
It's a fun time.
What else should we talk about?
We have one more Jersey connection that I think we'd be remiss if we didn't mention.
And that I think we have been remiss to not know about.
This is...
I know. I feel like I should not be allowed to say I'm from Jersey anymore after not knowing this.
Well, there's like a Mandela effect thing happening for me.
Yeah. I get that.
I am such a Jersey Devil obsessive.
I know you are.
But what
I can vouch. I can vouch for you, though. I
have read everything. I have watched. I thought everything. The thing that is upsetting to me about me missing this especially is like, I've looked at the Jersey Devil's Wikipedia, I'm sure. Unless I'm such a Jersey Devil snob that it's never occurred to me to go to the basic. That's the only thing I can think of. But I can't imagine also just as like someone who teaches research or has taught research, one of the things I always say is that like we turn our nose up at Wikipedia, but it's actually a great jumping off point. And I will often suggest to students to start with Wikipedia and then follow those sources. And it's a great place to start.
As long as you do it with your eyes wide open and know what a good source is.
100%.
It can be a starting place.
Yeah. It can't be where you end up, but you can certainly start there. So it seems unbelievable to me that I would have never visited the Jersey Devil Wikipedia page. And if I had, I would have seen in the like cultural relevance section of the Jersey Devil Wikipedia page, this section, which says, moreover, the Jersey Devil's fanciful or mythical nature is explored in the numerous works of fantasy it makes an appearance in, including X-Files. Yes, I know. The video game called Jersey Devil. Yes, I know. Wolf Among Us. Yes, I know. 13th Child. Yes, I know. I alluded to that last week. He's a character in the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle series. He is in an episode of The Real Adventures of Johnny Quest. There's a movie called The Barons. There's a list. And I have proof, Jodie. I have recorded an entire episode of the Jersey podcast breaking down all of these appearances. Yes. And somehow what we do in The Shadows, Supernatural, all of these. Somehow the Bruce Springsteen song, so many. There's so much. Legend Quest, so much. Somehow listed in here is a movie that I somehow did not know was a Jersey Devil movie. And it's called, you brought it up. So would you like
broadcast? Yeah.
I have to do some research because there's another movie I'm thinking of that has a similar title that when you said, oh, do you know about The Last Broadcast? I was like, yeah, obviously found footage movie, something about like people exploring an abandoned hospital or something. No, whatever I'm thinking of is a different movie. This is a Jersey Devil movie.
It's a Jersey Devil movie.
It's Jersey Devil found footage.
Yeah. Released a year before Blair Witch.
How, Jodie, how much closer can I get? How?
I feel like I broke you when I told you this.
You did. How didn't I know this was a Jersey Devil movie? What the hell?
I don't know. So for those that also, like Andrea and myself, somehow missed this information, The Last Broadcast is a 1998 American horror film written, directed, and produced by Stephen Avalos and Lance Wheeler, who also star in the film. Stop me if this sounds familiar. Told in a pseudo-documentary format and employing the found footage technique, the fictional film appears to tell the story of a man convicted in 1995 of murdering his team of people one night during an expedition to find the mythical Jersey Devil in the New Jersey Pine Barrens. Also, the film is credited as the first feature-length film shot and edited entirely on consumer-level digital equipment. This is so...
They can't hear me blinking, but I am furiously blinking.
And it's so connected to Blair Witch to the point where, like, there was an allegation that, like, Blair Witch ripped off The Last Broadcast. But, you know, in reality, the Blair Witch Project as a film was begun years before it just came out. You know, it's like the story, it was a groupthink kind of thing. Like, well, it was in the air. This
goes back to actually a few different things we were saying kind of all coming together. But the first thing it goes back to is what I was saying about believing that Blair Witch Project that the filmmaker hadn't seen Cannibal Holocaust,
right? Because
if you're gonna make, and the like, with the increasing popularity of reality television and all of the things we've talked about, I'd have to go back to the beginning of this episode and recap everything. All of the things that made Blair Witch Project work the way it did so well when it did,
in 99, yeah,
it's because the atmosphere and the culture was creating a space for a movie like that. So it makes sense that more than one would pop up at this time.
There's also something out there in the air about the approach of the millennium and the failure of technology.
Totally.
That loops into all of this,
totally.
Right? Like the Y2K and all that was coming.
I would love to be able to say, oh, look, it's another example of people wanting to steal from Jersey and not admit it. You know what I mean? Like, but I just think it is very possible that, because, again, I don't know how you make a found footage movie without a camera crew. And it seems like this is way more specific than Cannibal Holocaust, I think, because it's like a similar area. It's an urban legend. It's all of that. Right. So I could see, I'm more likely to believe the accusation here, but I just am not so ready to believe it 100%, especially because it does sound like Blair Witch 1993.
Right. It came out in 99.
But I think that they began to develop it in 93.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, they were casting, I think, by 96 or 97. And it wasn't, this movie didn't exist yet when they were working on it. And the story is something they developed when they were in college. So,
and I think it's
a non thing. But the fact that this movie exists and we did not realize that it was about the Jersey Devil is embarrassing. Humiliating, horrifying.
I just think I've slipped into a different timeline. That I come from a timeline where this movie didn't exist.
I know.
And it is truly unbelievable that I didn't know that this was a Jersey Devil movie.
According to our source of all sources, Wikipedia, it says that the film was made on a budget of $900.
All right, Jersey.
And edited on a desktop computer using Adobe Premiere 4.2.
Love that.
$600 was allocated for production, while $240 were utilized for digital video stock, which is not a thing. I guess they mean like memory cards. And 20 hours. Oh, they were doing digital to tape. Okay. Yeah. It was premiered regionally at the County Theater in Doylestown, Pennsylvania, released through an independent distribution company. Just like.
And you said off mic, when we were talking about this a little bit, these are Philly people.
It seems like they're Philly people. At least one of them for sure is a Philly person.
Which I don't,
Yeah, it's okay.
It's fine, I guess. We'll see.
Yeah.
We're not, listeners, this isn't the movie we're going to do next week because we know we've done a lot of horror and this is another found footage. Jodie and I are going to watch this movie and we're likely going to talk about it over at New Jersey is the World. And if and when we do, we'll let you know. So if you do want to watch this and talk with us about it, that's where that will be happening, and we'll let you know when. You can stream this for free on Tubi, tubi.com. I'll post a link in our show notes anyway. And my guess is if you like Blair Witch Project for what it is, you'll probably like this movie too. It seems to have been pretty well received. It's pretty good reviews.
50% on Rotten Tomatoes, which is not great, but yeah. There were people that really liked it, and then there were people that were like, this is shit. So we'll see.
Yeah.
It definitely doesn't get as good reviews as Blair Witch, but Blair Witch was a phenomenon. So that's really an unfair comparison.
Right. But of course, it's the only, as far as I know, I think it's the only piece of Jersey Devil media that I have never encountered before. So, of course, I have to watch it.
It also has an incredible website.
Yes.
Like, apparently they were also trying to do this, like, viral, like, you know, internet-based campaign where they created a website for it and all this stuff. And it's still on the internet, and you can still see the original website from 97 to 99. And it's so late 90s. It's incredible.
It's amazing.
Yeah. I'm excited to watch it just to see it. Yeah. I'm going to keep saying this. I don't like horror movies. I do a Yellow Jackets podcast that has now done like a whole bunch of horror movies, but I don't generally like horror movies. But it's about the Jersey Devil, so therefore I have to watch it.
Yeah. This isn't a horror movie. This is a biopic about one of my biological children. And
yes,
as my friend, you should,
want to know your family history.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So that's for another day, another podcast. All of that to say, we just spent a lot of time talking about a movie we're not going to cover. We should talk about the movie we are going to cover. You and I have gone back and forth a little bit about what direction. We've kind of been doing these little mini series, right? We had our
Alan Moyle, like 3 weeks. Yeah.
We did those couple of Jersey filmmaker Jersey movies. We did our little Halloween run. But the big one was like our kind of like young, how would you describe that first batch?
Like 90s teen sort of like, yeah, John Hughes-esque, even if it wasn't John Hughes.
And through that John Hughes-esque collection, that's when we developed our film, what would you call that, spectrum, dichotomy, whatever.
Yeah, I would say it's our theory of the podcast. It's our the two poles of Jodie and Andrea as film watchers.
Molly Ringwald and the John Candy of it all.
Yes.
And I think
of course, you being the John Candy and me being the Molly Ringwald.
I don't think we need to clarify. I think listeners know. If you've listened for more than 30 seconds, I think you know. And I think for fun, because we did just watch a bunch of vaguely scary stuff,
dark things.
We're going to go back to our roots. Well, not our roots, because our roots is Yellow Jackets, and that is dark, but our other roots.
Like the newly formed roots that haven't gone down to all the way. Oh, that's not how roots work. Never mind. The new ones are the ones down in the bottom.
Because
I understand nature.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. That didn't work at all.
We're teachers, but we're not science teachers. So
no. We're going back to a few months ago.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And we're going to watch... I think here's how I picked my movie. This is a movie I have loved for a very long time. It brings me so much joy. And
we need joy after the last month of movies. Yes.
Exactly.
I specifically requested joy.
You did. And I am picking probably the silliest movie I have picked so far. And I know that that's saying something.
I'm ready for silly.
I'm so happy.
I picked some silly ones. I picked Girls Just Want to Have Fun. That is a silly fucking movie.
That is a silly fucking movie.
Yeah.
I have picked a Nora Ephron written, Herbert Ross directed movie from 1990.
Mm-hmm.
Once again, me picking movies that I was 4 when this movie came out. I didn't see it in the theater, but it's a movie that has been part of my history for so long that I don't remember not knowing this movie. It stars 2 of my favorites, Steve Martin and Rick Moranis. I think John Candy was also a big fan of those 2.
Oh my God. See, listeners, what you missed is the conversation where I told Andrea that she's basically got the same movie taste as my father. My deceased father, who is now speaking to me through Andrea and this podcast.
And has impeccable taste, obviously.
Yes.
Because
yes, you and my dad would have really gotten along, actually. You guys would have loved each other.
Well, rest in peace, Mr. Jodie's father. Dad.
Oh my God. Yeah. So what are we watching? What is it?
We're watching My Blue Heaven, and I am smiling so hard my cheeks hurt right now. This movie is so stupid. I love it so much. I have not even looked at where you can watch it.
My dad loves Steve Martin.
I love Steve Martin. Rick Moranis, Steve Martin, John Candy, like put them on Mount Rushmore for me.
Yeah. You can rent it for $2.99 on YouTube.
It's a steal at any price.
I think that's the most easiest option. It's also, and you can rent it anywhere for about $3. So
perfect.
Yeah.
I'm going to tell the listeners the same thing I told you, which is all you need to know about this movie is that Steve Martin plays a character named Vinnie Antonelli, and he has the accent to match. And Rick Moranis plays a character named Barney Coopersmith. And he also has the voice to match, but it's just because it's Rick Moranis' voice. Does that make sense?
It does. It does.
And Vinnie Antonelli is in witness protection because of some mafia
little bit of hiding
stuff.
out vibes.
This movie is a lot. It's not a lot like Hiding Out, but a little bit of Hiding Out vibes there. And Rick Moranis plays the FBI agent who is assigned to keep watch over him. Joan Cusack is also in it. Carol Kane is in it. It's Daniel Stern is in it. It's just one of my favorites.
I think it's going to be fun.
It is going to be fun.
Yeah. I just need a little bit of levity. And also just to like kind of let people into our conversation that they will not hear. We are in December going to kind of do another themed month because there's one movie that Andrea and I have both decided we have to talk about. We're not going to tell you what that is right now, but
no, but it is our holiday gift to ourselves and to you.
And to you. If you haven't seen this movie, we are going to be doing you the world's biggest service by making you watch it.
And if you have seen this movie, it's one you'll probably be watching anyway, so you might as well hang out with us and talk about it. And if you've seen this movie,
it's a movie that is very special to you and you'll be excited to hear us talk about. So, yes. But next week, we will be watching My Blue Heaven.
The trailer is playing right now, and it is...
You're glowing.
I really am. I love it.
You're glowing.
I'm already prepared though, because if you haven't seen this movie, watch it. It's delightful. It's fun. It's very silly. Though I will be interested to see what it's like for someone watching it.
It's going to be like hanging out with my dad. I'm up for it.
Get ready. Get ready, everybody.
I can't wait. If I accidentally call you Ed, just roll with it.
You got it.
Okay.
Where can they find us?
They can find us on Instagram and Twitter at WatchersPodNJ. They can also find me on Instagram at Jodie Mim, JODIE_MIM. That's my art account.
I'm at AQ Andrea Q. It's my pictures of cats and dogs account.
And listen to other podcasts that we are occasionally involved in. New Jersey is the world. And Andrea works on Beautiful Anonymous, among other things.
Oh, yeah.
So, yeah. Check them out.
The one coming out today was really, really fun and lovely. If you haven't listened to Beautiful Anonymous, I would say this week would be a really lovely and representative week.
Nice.
So check it out.
Yeah, big fan.
Just a fun call with a really thoughtful, nice person.
Yeah. We're out of here. We'll see you next week.
In the burbs, not in the woods.
In the burbs. Yes.
Have you ever seen The Burbs?